Hello again everyone, and today I'm going to be doing a group test of 2 tilt-shift lenses and 1 shift lens for full-frame digital SLR cameras. Here we have the Canon 17mm f4L tilt-shift lens at $2,100 US, Nikon's 19mm f4 tilt-shift lens at a huge $3,400 US, and Venus Optics' new Laowa 15mm f4.5 shift lens, which only costs $1,200 US, but doesn't feature a tilt function, it only shifts. They are all manual focus lenses for full-frame digital SLR cameras, and all can be adapted onto mirrorless cameras too. A small difference is that the Laowa lens does not feature electronic aperture control here, only manual aperture control. Full disclosure here, Venus Optics, the maker of the Laowa lens, asked me to make this video, and they arranged for a hire company to loan me the Canon and Nikon lenses for testing to make it happen. I agreed, but only on the condition that they understood it would be a completely independent review, and they were happy with that, so I won't be showing any bias towards the Laowa lens or either of its competitors, despite people believing I'm still a bit of a Canon fanboy. And if you'd like more details about any one of these lenses, including a brief summary of what it is that tilt-shift lenses actually do, then check out the description for links to my full reviews of each one. Let's have a look at some of the basic differences. I've outlined one of them already. The Laowa lens does not have a tilt function and the others do. That means that the Canon and Nikon lens can tilt your plane of focus, a feature that's mostly used for product photography or for artistic effect. It's not a top priority though in an ultra-wide angle lens. The key use for all 3 of these lenses will probably be architecture photography. And that's where the shift feature will really shine. It corrects your perspective. The shift function can also be made to take wide panoramic images by shifting the lens horizontally to varying degrees and stitching together the final pictures. You can even have some fun by including yourself in the final images. The Laowa lens has a nice advantage here in offering the widest angle of the 3 lenses, getting more of your image in frame. However, the other 2 lenses can shift themselves very slightly further than the Laowa, as far as 12mm compared to the Chinese lens's 11mm. Another major difference between the lenses is their size. Without the tilt feature, the Laowa lens is much smaller and lighter than the rather gigantic Canon and Nikon lenses, and it'll take up far less room in your camera bag. You should also remember that the Laowa lens is compatible with a number of different camera systems, while the Canon and Nikon lenses will only work properly with their respective cameras. One other thing to remember is that the Canon and Nikon lenses have electronic aperture control and record EXIF information to your camera, whereas the Laowa lens does not, although they are all manual focus lenses. Alright, well, those are some of the key differences in build quality and features. Now let's look at the differences in image quality. All 3 lenses are getting tested on 45 megapixel full-frame cameras here, although the Laowa lens is at a slight disadvantage because it can't take advantage of in-camera corrections like the other 2 lenses can. We'll start with the lenses being unshifted. At their widest apertures, each lens is fantastically sharp in the middle with excellent contrast. When it comes to corner image quality, all 3 lenses put in a similar performance again. Perhaps the Nikon lens is just very slightly behind here. Here are all 3 lenses at f5.6 and now f8, where they all continue to look great. Perhaps the Canon lens has just the tiniest of advantages now. Finally, here's f11. So each lens looks very good when unshifted. Now let's shift the lenses upwards as far as they will go. How do they cope when pushed to the limit? At their widest aperture, each lens sees a deterioration in the middle of their images. The Laowa lens comes off the worst here, although you should bear in mind that its colour fringing is not being corrected like the other 2 lenses are. Let's check out the least stretched corner. Again, both the Canon and Nikon lenses look reasonably good, and the Laowa lens lags behind. Now let's look into the most stretched corners. Interestingly, the Laowa lens pulls ahead of its two competitors now, showing noticeably more sharpness and less colour fringing than the Canon lens. How curious. Let's top all three lenses down to f5.6. All three now see a marked improvement, but the Laowa lens is still coming out slightly ahead in the most stretched corners. Also, in the least stretched corners, it suddenly catches up to the other two, more expensive lenses, offering the same sharpness and contrast now. Back in the middle though, it's still a little softer. The Canon lens seems the sharpest, and the Nikon lens seems to offer the most contrast. Let's top down to f8 now. All three lenses see an improvement, although the Canon still looks the sharpest in the middle. Here's f11, where all three look great, although in the middle the Laowa lens is still very slightly behind. Over in the corners though, all three lenses are equally excellent, from the least stretched corners and up into the most stretched corners, where again the Laowa lens seems to have a small advantage over the other two. So, some really curious and mixed results here. Generally speaking, I think the Canon lens is the sharpest by a small margin, the Nikon lens offers the most contrast by a small margin, and the Laowa lens seems to have the sharpest corners, again by a small margin. All three lenses need to be stopped down for best results. You should definitely avoid using them at their brightest apertures when they are shifted. Let's take a look at results for distortion and vignetting now. When unshifted, all three lenses show very little distortion at all. The Laowa lens shows the least, whereas the Nikon lens shows a touch of barrel distortion. Let's shift the lenses up again. The Canon and Laowa lenses show impressively little distortion here, considering they're being shifted so hard. The Nikon lens shows just a touch more barrel distortion though. All three lenses show plenty of darkness at the top of their images now, at the brightest apertures. Stop them down to f11 to see the stretched part of the image brightening up. Here, the Nikon lens seems to show the least vignetting, although only by a little. Now, let's take a look at close-up image quality. The Canon and Nikon lens can focus down to 25 cm, and the Laowa lens can get a bit closer, down to 20 cm. All three lenses see a slight drop in contrast when shooting close-up, but they all look quite nice. Stop down to f5.6 and their contrast improves, and all three lenses look very nice. So, those are some of the key differences between all three lenses. They all have similar levels of flaring, well, as long as you stop the Laowa lens down to f5.6, and they all have similar levels of chroma smearing too. Check out the full reviews for more information. When it comes to comparing and contrasting the three lenses, we really are playing a huge game of swings and roundabouts here. The Laowa lens is far smaller than the other two, but they in turn have a tilt function, although admittedly that's not such an important feature on an ultra-wide angle lens, and the Laowa lens does have the widest angle, which is really useful. In terms of image quality, the Canon lens seemed very slightly sharper than the other two options, the Nikon lens had a touch more contrast, and the Laowa lens very slightly sharper corners, although all three lenses were relatively comparable. The Laowa lens showed marginally less distortion than the other two, and the Nikon lens marginally less vignetting. The Nikon lens was sharpest when shooting close-up, but not by much. What I'm saying is that there were lots of little differences between all three lenses, so you might want to think a little carefully about your exact needs before making your choice. The lens that is by far the best value for money is the Laowa option, costing a little over $1,000, which is actually very good value for a shift lens. The Canon lens costs double the price, and the Nikon lens, well, I hate to say it, but it's a bit of a rip-off, and, well, I'll leave all that information for you to process. Have fun, and I hope this video was useful. As I've said before, it's my pleasure to put these reviews together for everyone. If you find them helpful, then please feel free to check out my Patreon page, where you can find all kinds of exclusive content and videos and sneak previews for anyone who'd like to support the channel for only $3 a month. It's not just about increasing my personal beer fund, it makes a real difference to keeping these tests going. See you again soon.